He hadn't even unpacked. His boots, still laced with Afghan dust, creaked softly with each step. He wore his combat uniform not out of pride, but because it was all he had clean. Name patch over his chest. R. Hale. Freshly discharged, honorably, decorated. But to the man behind the diner counter, he was just a problem. "Not today," the manager said without looking up. "We don't serve your kind here." At first, Hale thought he'd misheard. The words felt too absurd to be real, but no one corrected it. No customer protested. A few lowered their eyes to their coffee cups. One woman pulled her child closer. He didn't argue. Didn't ask what his kind meant. Combat vet, gun on his hip, burn mark on his cheek. He just nodded once, turned around and walked outside, into the cold drizzle settling over Main Street, sat on the curb like a man waiting for a ride that wasn't coming, elbows on knees, back straight, the same posture he held on Overwatch patrol. Inside the diner, people pretended it hadn't happened. Eggs were forked into mouths, silverware clinked, conversations resumed, forced and flat. But 20 miles out, in a dusty garage that looked like nothing, someone's phone buzzed. A man looked at the screen, saw a name, and stood up without a word. Because you don't ignore a message from someone who once pulled you from a burning Humvee. And in 30 minutes, no one in that diner would be pretending anymore. If you believe uniformed silence still demands respect, hit like, type honor in the comments, and subscribe. Because this story proves some warriors don't need weapons to be remembered. Private First Class, Ryan Hale was never loud. He wasn't the guy to drink first or talk big at base. He was the one who stayed behind to clear gear, double-check bolts, help the new recruits lace their boots properly. Quiet competence. He'd grown up in that very town, Springwater, Montana, population just under 9,000. A football scholarship got him out, but a ruptured ACL sent him into the Army. Infantry. First deployed at 21. By 23, 2 tours. By 24, a medal for pulling 3 soldiers from a burning convoy truck under enemy fire. No camera crews, no parade, just the heat, the smoke, and the sound of rounds flying past his ears. When his unit rotated back stateside, Hale's only plan was to get some sleep, maybe rebuild his dad's old Chevy, and visit the diner his mom used to take him to after church. Bonnie's Cafe. Burgundy booths, burned toast, bottomless coffee. Nothing special, just home. He hadn't told anyone he was coming back early. Wanted it quiet. No attention, just a plate of eggs and maybe a pancake or two. Something normal. But when he walked in, wet boots squeaking, duffel on one shoulder, the room shifted, like someone had brought a wolf into a pasture. The manager, Rick, used to coach middle school baseball, just stared. "Take it to go," he said. Hale blinked. "I'd like to sit." Rick folded his arms. "Look, man, we've had vets come in, start shouting. Some of you don't handle it well. You understand." Hale said nothing, just turned and left. It was supposed to be eggs, that's all he wanted. Instead, it became a spark. Hale didn't want trouble. That was the part people always got wrong about soldiers like him. They imagined the war came home with you in your fists, your voice, your eyes. But Hale didn't carry rage. He carried quiet. The kind that knew what it cost to raise your voice when bullets answer back. All he wanted was to feel normal again, one meal. In silence, among strangers. No one asking about IEDs or body counts, no one flinching when he reached for a napkin. He'd spent 9 months being hyper-aware of door frames, of sounds in the night. He just wanted coffee he didn't have to drink from a pouch. His plan that morning was simple. Diner, eat, walk back to his mom's old house, now dusty and empty, start figuring out what came next. He wasn't planning on becoming anyone's story. He wasn't here to represent veterans or wave a flag. He was just Ryan. With sand in his boots, a duffel over his shoulder, and a heart that beat a little too fast in enclosed spaces. But now, sitting on the curb, soaked and stone-faced, the mission had changed. Not because he wanted it to, because it had been forced on him. Somewhere inside, a wire had been crossed, not the kind that leads to violence. Ryan had control, but the kind that turns a man from quiet to determined. He pulled out his phone, not to film, not to rant. He opened his messages, one contact, labeled simply, Torch, and he typed 4 words, I need a check-in. The thing about small towns is, they forget too fast, and forgive even faster, especially when the person they wronged doesn't make a fuss. So inside Bonnie's cafe, after Hale left, life resumed with a cowardly calm. Rick, the manager, poured another pot of coffee. A couple near the window resumed their crossword. A sheriff's deputy, who'd seen the whole thing, scratched his neck and looked away. No one followed Hale. No one said, that wasn't right. Because speaking up costs social credit in places like Springwater. It means picking sides, and nobody likes picking sides when comfort's still on the table. But outside, across town, in a workshop behind an old VFW hall, a man named Torres got the message. He didn't curse, didn't panic, just stood up, set down a wrench, and walked to a locker. Inside, folded neat as ever, tactical gear, dog tags that hadn't clinked in 2 years. Sergeant Miguel Torres had promised himself he'd never answer another call like this, but Ryan Hale wasn't just a soldier, he was his boy, his fire team partner, the one who dragged him out with 2 cracked ribs and a collapsed lung, the one who said, we all go or none. Torres walked out of the garage, started the engine of a matte black pickup, and made 2 calls. One to a woman named Casey, ex-military, now local PD, the other to his captain. By the time the truck hit the highway, a 3rd vehicle had already turned off the interstate. Because sometimes, when the world fails a soldier, the soldiers fix it themselves. The clouds thickened as the clock struck 10:34 a.m. Hale remained seated on the curb, silent, his jacket now soaked. A kid on a scooter paused nearby, looking at the patch on his arm. The boy's father tugged him away without a word. Cars passed, one honked, no one stopped. In the diner, a buzz started. Whispers. The waitress, Shannon, leaned toward Rick. Are you sure you should have said that? Rick shrugged. I've got a business to run. Then, something unusual. The town's stoplight, a relic that rarely turned red, froze. Traffic paused as 3 vehicles rolled through in formation. A matte black truck, a green SUV, a beige Jeep with military decals, faded but proud. Torres was the first to step out. Combat boots, beard now gray-streaked. His presence snapped the silence outside like glass underfoot. People peered from inside stores. Phones came out, curious, nervous. The SUV doors opened next. A woman with salt and pepper hair emerged, clean-cut, crisp stance. Casey, now Sergeant Casey Rollins, had traded her army boots for a badge, but she still walked like she was clearing rooms. Inside Bonnie's cafe, things didn't make sense yet, but outside, the air was changing. Ryan Hale looked up slowly. Torres nodded once. You okay, brother? Hale didn't smile, didn't nod. He just said, didn't come for me. Came for the principal. Torres looked at the diner, his jaw tightened. Then let's show them what respect looks like. Casey entered first. The diner's bell chimed. Everyone looked up, and everyone froze. It wasn't just the uniform. It was the command in her eyes, the silence she carried like a drawn weapon. Behind her came Torres and a 3rd man, Captain Monroe, army dress blues, chest lined with medals, left leg stiff with a prosthetic hinge. They didn't yell. Didn't demand. They walked to the front, stood before the counter. Rick's face went pale. This ain't necessary, he stammered. It was just a misunderstanding. Captain Monroe didn't blink. No, sir. What you said was crystal clear. He turned slowly to the crowd. An American soldier came home today. He asked for breakfast. You offered him shame. A few patrons stood. One woman reached for her coat. And now, Monroe continued, he doesn't need your apology. But this town needs a reckoning. He pointed to the window. Outside, Ryan still sat on the curb, still quiet, still alone. Monroe turned back. In 30 minutes, he reminded us what integrity looks like. Now, we're going to remind you what honor means. And as Monroe raised his hand in salute toward a man the town had cast aside, others in the diner slowly followed. One by one, veterans stood. A father, a mechanic, even the sheriff. Rick looked around and realized, for the first time in years, he was alone behind the counter. The town didn't know what to do with the silence. A man had been humiliated in the heart of Springwater, and now 3 decorated soldiers stood where the syrup dispensers usually sat. People who hadn't stood for the anthem in years were now rising to their feet, slowly, as if pulled up by something heavier than obligation. Ryan Hale stayed seated outside, still quiet, still soaked. He hadn't asked them to come, hadn't begged for backup, but they came anyway, because some calls don't need to be spoken out loud. Inside the diner, a veteran in his 70s, one of the few who had recognized Hale's name from the local paper, stood tall and saluted. "I saw him in Kandahar," he muttered to no one in particular. "Saved lives. Now he can't even get pancakes." Casey walked back outside. She knelt beside Hale. "You don't have to go back in," she said gently. Hale didn't answer at first, then, "Can we sit somewhere else? I still want that coffee." Torres cracked a dry smile. "Follow me." They walked together, Hale, Torres, Monroe, and Casey, to a small cafe down the street. The owner there didn't say a word, just pushed tables together and poured 4 mugs with hands that trembled slightly. A few townspeople followed quietly. Curious. Guilty. What started as humiliation was shifting into something else. Not quite redemption. Not yet. But something new. Something stronger than shame. Rick closed the blinds at Bonnie's Cafe, but it didn't block out the headlines. Within hours, photos had hit social media. A combat veteran soaked on a curb. 3 officers in uniform inside a small-town diner. The look on Rick's face when the salutes began. The caption under one photo read, "He served in silence. We stayed silent in return." By evening, the mayor had called an emergency meeting. Local news vans lined up outside City Hall. Protesters gathered, not loud, not violent, just holding signs that read, "We see you now." Silence isn't neutral. Hale sat in his mother's living room, lights off, staring at the ceiling. He hadn't meant for this. He hated attention, hated being seen as anything other than a man who had simply done his job. "I just wanted breakfast," he whispered. He'd tried to forget the war. Now it followed him home, but not in gunfire or nightmares. In a different kind of chaos, the weight of being a symbol. His phone buzzed again. A message from Kyle, an old squad mate now working with the VA. "They're organizing a recognition event. You should speak." Ryan stared at the screen. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a man who'd failed to blend back in. The moment threatened to undo him, not because of what was said at the diner, but because no one, not one civilian, had stood up. But something changed that next morning. It started with a knock on his front door. A boy, maybe 10, stood there awkwardly, a folded flag in his hands. "My grandpa said I should bring this to you. He said you reminded him of his buddy in Korea. He didn't get to say thank you back then." Hale knelt, accepted the flag, and nodded once. "Tell your grandpa," I said, "it means a lot." Later at the community hall, the mayor tried to apologize publicly. Hale refused to take the mic. Instead, he handed it to Captain Monroe, who stepped up and said one line. "A town isn't judged by how it treats its heroes on banners, but by how it treats them when they walk in hungry." Applause rippled, but it wasn't loud. It was respectful. Honest. A new plaque was unveiled that day, right next to the diner. No brand logos, no business sponsorship, just engraved metal. "In honor of PFC Ryan Hale and every quiet return, may no one ever sit alone again." And beneath it, etched smaller, "We don't serve your kind here. Never again." Ryan still didn't speak much, but he nodded to the crowd, placed his hand on the plaque, and then quietly stepped back. It wasn't a parade, but it was peace. The changes weren't just symbolic. Bonnie's Cafe shut down within a week. Rick posted a half-hearted statement about misunderstood intentions. But no one rallied for him. Even his own sister wrote online, "My brother embarrassed our family." Meanwhile, the cafe down the street, the one that served Hale without question, became a gathering point. Veterans met there every Thursday now, not to complain, just to exist, to be seen. Ryan started showing up weekly, always at the same table, sometimes alone, sometimes with Torres or Casey, occasionally with that 10-year-old boy and his grandfather, the scars on his hand. Still there, the memories, still locked behind tired eyes. But something about the air around him had softened, like a wound not healed, but no longer festering. A reporter asked him once why he didn't speak that day. He answered simply, "I'd already said enough with my silence." 6 months later, a new sign was erected at the entrance to Springwater. It didn't say, "Welcome to Springwater." It said, "This town serves those who've served." And beneath it, in smaller print, "Veterans eat free. Respect costs nothing." Ryan Hale never asked for that, never asked for anything. But now, when he walked down Main Street, kids waved, old men nodded, teenagers stepped aside with quiet deference. He wasn't a spectacle, he wasn't a hero to be worshipped. He was a man who'd walked through fire, sat in the rain, and reminded a town of its spine. Sometimes on foggy mornings you can still see him there, on that curb across from the old diner. Not broken, not bitter, just present. A new recruit from town recently joined the army. Before he shipped out, he stopped by that very curb and left a letter. Inside it read, "I don't want to be forgotten when I come back. Thanks for making it easier." And Ryan? He shows up at the train station now, when new soldiers leave, when old ones return, not to speak, not to lead, just to stand, so no one sits alone again.